The small town of Haven was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The streets, lined with crumbling houses, stood as silent witnesses to lives lived in poverty. Emily, a 17-year-old orphan, knew all too well the weight of the town's whispering air. She had no family, no home of her own, just a rundown orphanage that she called home. And even that felt like a distant dream at times. But today was different. It was a gray afternoon, the kind that made the sky feel heavy, like it was holding something back. Emily sat on the steps of the orphanage, her worn shoes scuffing against the chipped paint. She stared at the ground, lost in thought, when the sound of the old postman's cart broke through the silence. He was a familiar figure, his face weathered by time and years of delivering the town's mail. The sight of his tired horse and cart was something Emily had seen 1,000 times. It was no surprise when the cart pulled up in front of the orphanage. "Anything for me today?" Emily asked, forcing a smile as she stood up. The postman glanced at her, his eyes softening with sympathy. "Nothing today, Emily." "Sorry." She nodded, her smile fading. She didn't expect anything, really. Her life was one of constant waiting, waiting for a chance that might never come, waiting for someone to notice her. But this time, as the postman began to move on, something caught his eye. A small package, wrapped in plain brown paper, sat on the back of his cart, partially hidden by a stack of other letters. It looked out of place, unmarked, no address, nothing to show who it was for. "Actually, this one's yours," the postman said, hesitating for a moment before he handed it to her. Emily took the package in her hands, feeling the weight of it. It was heavier than she expected. The brown paper was plain and unmarked, with no sign of who had sent it or why it was for her. A knot of curiosity twisted in her stomach. There had to be some mistake. No one ever sent her gifts. But still, there it was. "Are you sure it's for me?" she asked, unable to hide the doubt in her voice. The postman shrugged. "Could be. You never know in this town. It's addressed to the orphanage, and you're the only one here who's still got a name on the list. Could be a good sign, I suppose." "Thanks," Emily muttered, staring at the package. The postman waved and drove away, leaving her standing there, alone with her thoughts, and the mysterious parcel in her hands. As she entered the orphanage, the rest of the children ran past her, laughing and shouting, oblivious to the strange delivery. Emily slowly made her way to the small room that she shared with 2 other girls, both of whom were out playing in the yard. She sat on her bed, the thin mattress creaking under her, and stared at the package. What could it be? With shaking hands, she carefully tore open the paper, careful not to damage anything. Inside. She lifted the flap of the box, revealing a small, velvet pouch. Her heart skipped a beat. It seemed out of place in a world like hers, too elegant, too mysterious. She ran her fingers over the smooth fabric, her curiosity overwhelming her caution. The pouch was heavy, and when she opened it, she was taken aback. Inside was a small object, a pendant, shaped like an ancient key. It glimmered in the dim light of the room, the metal dark and worn, as though it had been touched by countless hands over centuries. There was something unsettling about it. Something that felt wrong. But that wasn't what bothered her. What bothered her were the memories that came rushing to the surface as soon as her fingers brushed against the key. The memories weren't hers. They were flashes of another life, another person, another world. Emily's breath caught in her throat as the strange, vivid images overwhelmed her. She saw a grand house, not like any house she'd ever known, but one full of light and warmth. She saw a woman's face, beautiful, but tired. She heard a voice, soft and distant, calling her name. "Emily," it whispered. "Emily, you must remember. It's time." Her head throbbed as the memories began to fade, leaving her feeling disoriented and more confused than ever. She clutched the pendant in her hand, trying to steady herself. What was happening? Why did she feel like she was slipping between 2 worlds? A knock on the door pulled her back to reality. "Emily? Are you in there?" It was Miss Harper, the orphanage matron. Quickly, she shoved the pendant back into the pouch and placed it under her pillow. Her hands were trembling. She couldn't explain what had just happened, and she didn't want to try. Not yet. "I'm coming," Emily called, wiping her eyes as she stood up. When Miss Harper entered, she gave Emily a concerned look. "You okay? You seem a little pale." Emily forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just tired." Miss Harper didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press further. "Well, dinner's in half an hour. Don't be late." Emily nodded, still reeling from what had just occurred. Miss Harper left, and Emily locked the door behind her. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in on her as she sat down on the bed. She couldn't stop thinking about the pendant. What was it? Why had it come to her? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that there was something deeply unsettling about the whole situation. It wasn't just a random gift. It was something more. For the rest of the night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the images from those strange memories returned, flashing behind her eyelids. She saw the woman's face again. She saw the grand house. But there was more this time. There was a name. Ariana. Who was Ariana? And why did she know her? It was as though someone had planted these memories in her mind. But why her? Why now? The questions were endless, and the answers nowhere to be found. The next day, Emily made a decision. She had to find out what the pendant meant. Who sent it? Why? And why her? She couldn't ignore it. She couldn't just forget about it. This was her only chance, and she had to take it. Whatever the consequences. The orphanage was no longer a place of safety, it had become a cage. And she had to escape. The mystery of the pendant was just beginning, and Emily had no idea that it would lead her to places far darker than she could ever have imagined. The key in her hand wasn't just an object. It was a symbol. A symbol of something much bigger than herself, something that would soon change her life forever. What was hidden behind the key? And why had it come to her? The days after receiving the strange package passed in a blur, each moment filled with a rising sense of urgency that Emily couldn't shake. It was as though her life had suddenly split into two paths, one where she stayed in the orphanage, continuing her quiet, unnoticed existence, and another where she sought answers, answers that would change everything. And, for the first time, she felt the overwhelming pull to follow the second path. Each night, she sat in her small room, the pendant hidden under her pillow, replaying those haunting memories that had flooded her mind the moment she touched it. The grand house, the woman, the name, Ariana, echoed through her thoughts like a song she couldn't forget. The more she tried to ignore it, the more insistent the memories became. But there was one problem. She didn't know where to start. Who could she ask about a pendant that no one else had seen? Who could help her when the only thing she knew for sure was that someone, somewhere, had left her a gift, and a mystery, too big to ignore? On a particularly restless morning, Emily couldn't sit still any longer. Her legs ached to move, to do something, anything, to stop the questions from spiraling out of control. She slipped the pendant from under her pillow, hiding it carefully inside her jacket pocket. Then, as quietly as she could, she slipped out of her room, careful not to wake the other girls. The orphanage was eerily quiet that early, the morning fog still lingering outside. She passed by Miss Harper's office, hearing the faint sound of a radio. The last thing she needed was to be caught sneaking around. She had no plan, just an overwhelming need to find answers. Her first stop was the town library. The library was small and old, the kind of place that felt like it hadn't changed in decades. It smelled of dust, wood, and old paper. Emily had spent time there before, mostly looking through books for something to escape her reality. But today was different. Today, she was looking for something specific. As she stepped inside, the bell above the door jingled, announcing her arrival. The librarian, a woman in her late 50s named Mrs. Wilkinson, looked up over her glasses with a surprised expression. "Emily?" "What are you doing here so early?" she asked, setting her book aside. I need help with something," Emily said, trying to sound casual even though her heart was racing. "I'm looking for something. Something old. A key, or a pendant, or..." Mrs. Wilkinson raised an eyebrow. "A pendant? In my library?" She paused, studying Emily carefully. "Why don't you tell me what you're really looking for?" Emily hesitated, then leaned closer. "I think I've been sent something important. Something from the past. I don't know what it means yet, but it's connected to me." The librarian gave her a soft smile, clearly unconvinced. "The past can be tricky, Emily. But I'll help you if I can. Come on, I'll show you our historical archives. Perhaps you'll find something there that could shed some light." They walked through the library's back door into a room filled with old, dusty books and files. Mrs. Wilkinson pointed to a shelf stacked with weathered binders, some of them falling apart at the seams. "These are the town's records. They go back over 100 years, and some are in bad shape, but you might find something about past families, old traditions, or strange occurrences. It's not much, but it's all we have." Emily nodded, the excitement building in her chest. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She sifted through the yellowing papers, flipping through pages of town history, family trees, and faded photographs. The smell of the old documents filled the air, a reminder that everything here was tied to a time long past. Yet, despite hours of searching, she found nothing that pointed to the pendant or the mysterious Ariana. Just as she was about to give up, her eyes landed on a worn file tucked in the corner of a shelf. The name on the front made her blood run cold. Ariana Sterling. Her hands trembled as she pulled the file from the shelf and opened it. Inside, there was a collection of documents, letters, birth certificates, and photographs. As she flipped through the papers, a story began to unfold. Ariana Sterling was born into a wealthy family in Haven over 30 years ago. Her parents were well-known, influential figures in the town, but they had disappeared under mysterious circumstances when Ariana was just a child. There were whispers of a tragic accident, but no one knew the full story. Ariana had vanished without a trace, and no one had heard from her since. Emily's eyes widened. This was it. This was the connection she had been searching for. There were several photographs of Ariana, each one showing a beautiful young woman with dark eyes and a distant look. But the final photograph caught Emily's attention the most. It was a picture of Ariana standing in front of a large, grand house, much like the one in her memories. The house was old, but it had a timeless elegance to it. It looked familiar, too familiar. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the photo. She could see it now. The house. The same house that had appeared in her mind's eye when she touched the pendant. The woman in the photograph was the same woman from her memories. But how could that be? Was Ariana somehow connected to her? A voice broke her concentration. "Emily? You've been in here a while. Are you okay?" Emily snapped the file shut, startled. Mrs. Wilkinson stood in the doorway, her expression soft but concerned. I found something," Emily stammered, her mind racing. She felt the weight of the pendant in her pocket, as if it were calling to her. "I think it's connected to me. This woman, Ariana. I saw her, in my memories. I saw her house." Mrs. Wilkinson stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Ariana Sterling was the last of her family. They were very private people, and after their disappearance, no one knew what happened to her. There are rumors that she left behind something valuable, something hidden in that house. But no one's been able to find it. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Something valuable? What do you mean? The librarian hesitated, then lowered her voice. Some say Ariana's family was connected to something larger than the town, something dangerous. There are people still looking for what they believe she left behind. And that pendant of yours, it might be a key to unlocking it. Emily's mind spun with the possibilities. Had Ariana known something about her own past? Had the pendant been left for her to find? She didn't know, but one thing was clear, she had to find the house. She had to know the truth about Ariana Sterling, about her own connection to the woman in the photographs, and about what was hidden. "I have to go," Emily said, her voice urgent. "Thank you for your help, Mrs. Wilkinson. I need to find that house." Mrs. Wilkinson nodded slowly. "Be careful, Emily. There are some things that are better left buried." But Emily didn't listen. She couldn't. As she left the library and stepped back into the cold air of the town, the pendant burned a hole in her pocket, as if urging her forward. The mystery was growing, and she was no longer a passive observer. She was part of it. The house was out there. And she was going to find it. The drive to the town's edge felt longer than it should have, as if time itself was stretching to prolong her anticipation. Emily's fingers gripped the wheel of the old bicycle she borrowed from the orphanage's storeroom, the weight of her discovery pressing down on her shoulders. Each pedal brought her closer to the house from her memories, but with each turn of the wheel, the questions mounted, questions she couldn't answer, doubts she couldn't shake. The librarian's warning echoed in her mind. Some things are better left buried. But how could she leave this mystery unfinished? The pendant, the name Ariana, the house, and the photographs were all tied together in a way she couldn't quite explain. It was as though her life, her identity, had been hidden away in those faded papers, waiting to be found. The further she rode, the quieter the world became. The streets were emptier now, the buildings more spaced out. Eventually, the roads turned into narrow, unpaved paths that wound through a dense forest, and the trees towered above her, their shadows stretching across the dirt. Then, as she rounded a bend, Emily saw it. The house. It stood before her, as large and imposing as the photograph in the file. A sprawling mansion with ivy crawling up its stone walls, windows half covered in dust, and the unmistakable feeling of time slipping away from it. The house was older than anything she had ever seen, a forgotten relic, half-eaten by the elements and forgotten by the town. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost wrong. She stopped the bike and stared at it, heart racing. She had seen it in her dreams, in her memories, and now, here it was, as if it had always been waiting for her. Emily swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. She had to go inside. She had to find the truth. With one last glance at the house, she walked toward the front door. The grass around it was overgrown, and the steps creaked under her feet, but she didn't hesitate. The door was surprisingly open. A narrow crack was all that was needed to allow her in, as if the house itself had been expecting her. The smell hit her first, musty, old, with an undertone of something she couldn't quite place. The air was thick with dust and memories, and the floors groaned beneath her shoes. It felt like she had stepped back in time. Every inch of the house seemed to breathe with its own story, its own history. The grand chandelier in the entryway hung from the ceiling, untouched for decades. The furniture, draped in sheets, remained where it had been left, frozen in time. Emily's fingers brushed against the old banister as she ascended the staircase. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the house itself was holding its breath. She could almost hear Ariana's voice in the silence. "You are here. You found me. You're not alone." Reaching the top of the stairs, Emily's eyes darted from one room to another. She had no idea where to begin. The hallway stretched out before her, lined with closed doors, each one more mysterious than the next. She couldn't shake the feeling that the house was more than just a place, it was a key, a puzzle piece she needed to solve. A sudden sound from behind startled her. The faintest creak of floorboards. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned around, but no one was there. She couldn't deny it anymore. She wasn't alone in the house. Her pulse quickened. She stepped cautiously toward the nearest room, its door slightly ajar. The wooden frame creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. Yet there was something comforting about it, the dim light spilling through the cracks, the heavy, ancient air that seemed to tell stories of its own. She walked in and immediately felt the weight of the room. The walls were lined with bookshelves, but it wasn't the books that caught her attention. It was the desk. At the far side of the room, under a thick layer of dust, sat a large oak desk, its drawers slightly ajar. Her heart skipped again. Could this be where the answers lay? She rushed to the desk, her fingers trembling as she pulled open the top drawer. Inside, there were papers, old documents, photographs, and a small velvet box. The box was identical to the one in her memories, the one that had come with the pendant. She opened it slowly, and inside, she found something that made her stomach turn. A letter, handwritten in an elegant script. It was addressed to her. Emily. If you're reading this, then I'm long gone, and my secrets are yours to uncover. But know this, you are not who you think you are. You are part of a legacy that goes back farther than you can imagine. The pendant you found is more than just a trinket. It's a key, and you must use it to unlock the truth. I am Ariana Sterling, and this is your inheritance. The letter fell from her hands, and for a moment, she stood frozen, her mind reeling. The name on the letter, Ariana Sterling, was the same as the woman from the photograph. But this letter said it all. It said she wasn't just an orphan. She wasn't just some abandoned child. She was someone tied to this house, to this family, to this mystery. Her breath quickened. What was happening? Who had left this for her? And what was this legacy she had inherited? Emily turned back to the desk, her eyes scanning the papers scattered around. One caught her eye, a family tree. Her heart skipped a beat as she traced the names on the page. The Sterlings. And beneath the names, the words Ariana's legacy stood out in bold, dark ink. Her fingers shook as she followed the lines of the tree, but there was something wrong. The names listed were familiar, but they didn't match up. The dates were off. And then, at the very bottom, there was her name, Emily Sterling. The line was faint, as though it had been added later, like a whisper against the rest of the family's history. What did this mean? Why was her name there? Suddenly, Emily heard a sound from behind her. A soft footstep, too close. She turned quickly, her heart in her throat, but the room was empty. Her instincts screamed at her to leave. But she couldn't. She was too close now. Too close to the truth. She had to know what Ariana had meant by her inheritance. She had to understand what she was a part of. She grabbed the family tree and stuffed it into her jacket. The house had secrets, and she was going to uncover every single one of them. But just as she turned to leave the room, a voice called out from the shadows. Emily. Her heart froze in her chest. The voice was low and menacing, but unmistakable. Ariana. The voice from the shadows lingered in the air, a whisper that sent chills down Emily's spine. She turned, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was empty, or so it seemed. The shadows seemed to pulse with an unseen presence, as though something, or someone, was hiding just out of view. Emily, the voice called again, a little louder this time, unmistakable. A cold sweat broke out on Emily's forehead. The voice was coming from the far corner of the room, near the window, but there was no one there. The curtains fluttered slightly, as if moved by an invisible hand. Her breath caught in her throat, and she instinctively took a step back. Who's there? She called out, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The room felt heavier now, as though the walls were closing in, pressing against her chest. A faint rustling noise came from the corner where the voice had originated, followed by a soft chuckle. It was eerie, unsettling. Don't be afraid, Emily. You've come so far already. Emily's mind raced. She recognized the voice. It was the same voice from the letter, the one that had belonged to Ariana Sterling. But Ariana was gone. She had to be. So who was speaking now? Who was hiding in this room, playing with her mind? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice shaking but determined. The chuckle faded, replaced by a strange, almost pitying sigh. I want you to understand, Emily. You've been searching for answers, but you haven't asked the right questions. You're not just here by accident. You're here because you were meant to be. You're a part of something much larger than yourself. Emily's heart raced. The words were cryptic, unsettling. What do you mean? She demanded. Who are you? The room remained silent for a moment, and for a split second, Emily thought the voice had disappeared. But then, the silence was shattered by a sound she couldn't ignore, the slow creak of the door opening behind her. Her pulse quickened. She spun around, her eyes wide with terror. The door was wide open now, but there was no one there. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Her skin tingled with the sensation of eyes on her, but when she looked around, she saw no one. She was completely alone in the room. Or was she? Emily turned back to the desk, the family tree still clutched in her hand. Her fingers shook as she tried to make sense of the tangled web of names and dates. The more she looked at it, the more she realized that something was terribly wrong. There was a connection between the Sterlings and herself, something deep, hidden beneath the surface. But what was it? She couldn't just stand there, lost in her confusion. There was more to this house, more to this mystery. She needed to dig deeper, but the weight of the house's secrets was pressing down on her, suffocating her. Without thinking, she turned and walked toward the back of the room, where the shadows were darkest. She could almost hear a faint whisper calling her name, urging her forward. Her feet moved of their own accord, guided by some force beyond her control. She reached the back wall, where an old portrait hung crookedly. It was a painting of a woman, Ariana, no doubt. She stared at it for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. The eyes of the woman in the painting seemed to follow her, and Emily felt as though they were judging her, waiting for her to make the next move. Slowly, she reached up and straightened the painting, and behind it, she saw it, a hidden panel in the wall, slightly ajar, as if inviting her to open it. Her heart raced again. She felt the pull, the overwhelming sense that this was it. This was what she had been searching for. With trembling hands, she pushed the panel open. Inside, there was a small, dust-covered box. It was locked, but there was no key in sight. It didn't matter. Emily's curiosity burned too brightly to stop now. She had come too far. She searched the desk, the shelves, and the surrounding area, but there was no sign of a key. The only thing that seemed to remain was the pendant, the one she had found in the old file. She hadn't thought much of it before, but now, standing in front of the hidden box, it felt as though the pendant was calling to her. Her fingers brushed over it, and a strange warmth spread through her palm. The pendant seemed to hum softly, as if alive. There was something unmistakable about it, something powerful that connected it to the house, to the mystery, and to Ariana herself. Without thinking, she took the pendant and pressed it into the lock of the hidden box. To her astonishment, the lock clicked open. The box creaked as she lifted the lid, revealing a stack of old letters and photographs, along with something that took her breath away, an envelope, sealed with crimson wax. Her name was written on it, but the handwriting was different from the one in the letter she had already read. This handwriting was more delicate, almost childlike. She took the envelope from the box, her hands trembling. The weight of it felt impossibly heavy in her palms. She ripped it open, and inside, she found a letter written in that same delicate script. Emily. If you are reading this, then you have uncovered more than you ever imagined. You are closer than ever to understanding the truth, but you must be careful. There are forces at play here that you cannot yet comprehend. The house you have entered is not just a home, it is a prison, a place where the truth is hidden from the world. My family, the Sterlings, made a dangerous pact, one that they could never undo. You, Emily, are the key to breaking that pact. You are the one who can finally free us all. But remember, not everyone wants to see the truth revealed. Some would rather keep the secrets buried. Trust no one. Yours, Ariana Sterling. The words hit her like a wave. And for a moment, Emily felt dizzy, as though the ground beneath her was slipping away. The letter, the house, Ariana, everything was connected in ways she hadn't even begun to understand. The photograph she had seen earlier flashed in her mind again. The one of Ariana, standing in front of the mansion, a smile on her face. She had looked so calm, so peaceful. But now, the picture seemed to tell a different story, a story of betrayal, danger, and desperation. Emily stood frozen for a long moment, trying to process everything. But there was no time to waste. She had to act, and she had to act quickly. The letter had warned her, there were people who didn't want the truth to come out. And as she stood there, clutching the letter and the pendant, she realized one thing: she wasn't just trying to uncover a family secret anymore. She was fighting for her life. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she slowly folded the letter from Ariana Sterling. The weight of its words still pressed heavily on her chest, and every instinct screamed for her to turn away, to run from this place and never look back. But deep down, she knew there was no escaping the mystery she had stumbled into. Ariana's words, the hidden gifts, the strange occurrences, it was all too connected, too real to ignore. The house itself seemed to be watching her, the silence amplifying her every move. She could still hear the soft rustle of the wind outside, the sound of leaves brushing against the windowsill, but inside, there was nothing. The air was thick with secrets, the walls closing in as the mystery tightened its grip on her. She glanced at the photograph in her hand again. Ariana's smiling face seemed so distant now, like a ghost from the past who had known things she could never have understood. The house, the mansion where Ariana had grown up, had once been filled with joy and life, but now it felt like a tomb, haunted by the memories of its former inhabitants. The hidden room where she had found the letter was dimly lit by the faint light creeping through the cracked window. As Emily stood there, holding the letter, she felt a strange compulsion to keep moving. There was something else she needed to find, something more she had to uncover before it was too late. The pendant she had used to unlock the box still rested in her palm, warm to the touch as though it were alive. The closer she examined it, the more she felt the pull of its mystery. What did it mean? Why had it been hidden with such care? Her mind raced with questions, but before she could process them further, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. She spun around, heart pounding, but once again, there was no one there. The room remained as still as it had been before, almost unnervingly so. Emily exhaled, her nerves frayed by the constant tension that seemed to hang in the air. But this time, something was different. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed darker than before, as if they had shifted in her absence. The atmosphere in the house had changed, grown more oppressive, more aware of her presence. She couldn't stand still any longer. Ariana's letter had warned her about the dangers of staying in one place for too long. There was something she had to find, something that would tie everything together. With a resolve she hadn't known she had, Emily left the hidden room, her steps echoing through the long hallways of the mansion. The house felt labyrinthine, like it was designed to confuse and disorient her, leading her down endless corridors that twisted back upon themselves. But she couldn't stop now. There was a purpose, a reason why she was here. As she walked deeper into the mansion, she passed by rooms that seemed frozen in time, rooms with dusty furniture, curtains that had faded from the sun, and old photographs hanging crookedly on the walls. The mansion had once been beautiful, she was sure of it. Now, it felt abandoned, as though it had been forgotten by the world for decades. Yet there was something alive in the walls, something that whispered to her, urging her to keep going. Eventually, Emily found herself standing before a large, ornate door. It was different from the others. This one was made of dark wood, with intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story of their own. The carvings depicted scenes of family life, people laughing, playing, and gathering together. But as her eyes lingered on them, she realized that some of the figures were out of place. There were shadowy figures in the background, faces half hidden, their features obscured as though they were not meant to be seen. Something told Emily that this door held the answers she was looking for. Her hand shook as she reached for the handle, but before she could turn it, the door creaked open by itself, as if inviting her inside. With a deep breath, Emily stepped into the room. The air inside was thick, musty, as if the room hadn't been opened in years. The walls were lined with bookshelves, but they were mostly empty, save for a few scattered volumes. At the far end of the room, a grand desk sat under a large window, the dim light casting long shadows across the surface. Her eyes were drawn to the desk immediately. There, sitting in the middle, was a small wooden box, much like the one she had opened earlier. It seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow, almost as if it had been waiting for her to arrive. She approached the desk cautiously, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet beneath her. The box was similar in appearance to the one she had discovered earlier, but this one was different. It was adorned with strange symbols, symbols she didn't recognize but felt a strange connection to. Her fingers hesitated above the box. The pull to open it was irresistible. But just as she was about to lift the lid, a voice broke the silence. "Leave it alone, Emily." The words sent a shock through her system, and she froze. Her heart skipped a beat as she spun around, searching for the source of the voice. But once again, there was no one there. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The voice didn't respond immediately. Instead, the silence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Emily," it finally said, this time softer, almost pleading. "You don't understand. There's more to this than you know." Her pulse quickened. The voice was familiar, yet not. It was the same voice that had whispered in the shadows, the one she had heard earlier in the room with the family tree. But it was different now, softer, almost as if it were trying to warn her. She couldn't ignore it. She had come this far. She needed answers. "Who are you?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. There was a long pause, and then the voice spoke again, this time with a sense of urgency. "You must leave this place. It's too dangerous. They're watching you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, like invisible eyes were tracking her every move. But who? Who was watching her? The voice continued, its tone more frantic now. "The Sterlings, your family, they made a pact with forces beyond our understanding. Ariana was the last to try and break it, and now you are the only one left. They won't stop until the pact is completed." Emily's mind reeled. She didn't know what to believe anymore. The mystery was growing deeper, more tangled, and every answer seemed to lead to more questions. Who could she trust? "What pact?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. There was no response, just the sound of the wind howling outside. Emily looked at the box on the desk, and her fingers itched to open it. She knew there was something inside that could answer everything, something that could reveal the truth. But what if the voice was right? What if opening the box would make things worse? Her heart raced as she stood frozen in place, caught between the need for answers and the fear of what she might find. Suddenly, the door behind her slammed shut, cutting off any escape. Emily spun around, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The room was now completely dark, the light from the window blocked by an eerie fog that seemed to roll in from nowhere. And in that darkness, she heard it, a low, guttural sound, like a growl, coming from somewhere deep within the walls. She wasn't alone. The mystery was closing in. And it was about to take a turn she never could have predicted. The growl echoed in the darkness, reverberating through Emily's bones. Her heart raced, pounding in her chest as she stood frozen in the middle of the room. The darkness was suffocating, wrapping around her like a thick, oppressive fog. She could feel it closing in, the air growing colder with every passing second. It was as though the house itself was alive, aware of her presence and intent on keeping its secrets hidden. She didn't know what was worse, the growl that seemed to come from nowhere, or the fact that she couldn't see a single thing in the room anymore. The once familiar mansion had turned into something unrecognizable, a place of shadows and whispers. It no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but where? The door behind her had slammed shut, trapping her inside. The darkness seemed to have swallowed up the very light that had once streamed through the windows. She was alone, alone in a house that felt more like a living, breathing creature than a building. The sound of the growl came again, louder this time, and closer. Emily's pulse quickened. Her legs trembled, but she fought the panic rising in her chest. She wasn't going to fall apart. She couldn't. Her hand reached out blindly in front of her, groping for anything solid to hold on to. Her fingers brushed against the surface of the desk, and for a moment, she felt the comforting texture of the wood beneath her fingertips. It was grounding, but it wasn't enough. She needed to understand what was happening. She needed answers. The box on the desk loomed in front of her, its strange carving still glowing faintly in the dark. It called to her, its presence undeniable, as if it held the key to everything, the mystery, the danger, the truth. She could feel it deep in her bones. But the voice, had warned her not to open it. "They're watching you." Emily's hand hovered over the box, her pulse racing in time with her thoughts. She couldn't leave without knowing what was inside. Everything had led to this moment. The hidden gifts, the mysterious letters, the strange occurrences, it all pointed to this one object. She had to open it. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid of the box, the creaking sound seeming to echo far too loudly in the stillness of the room. Inside, there was no treasure, no glittering jewels or shiny trinkets. Instead, the box contained a single, folded piece of parchment. It was old, the edges frayed, and it smelled faintly of must and age. The paper itself was thick, heavy, as though it had been carefully preserved for years. Emily's hand shook as she unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words written in a hurried, almost desperate script. "To the one who finds this, you are the last. The last to understand. The last to survive." The words burned into her mind as she read them. Her heart skipped a beat. She felt as if the walls were closing in around her. This was it, the answer she had been seeking. But the words only led to more questions. The Sterlings made a pact, a promise, to a power beyond human comprehension. Ariana tried to break it, but she failed. Now, the house is cursed, and so are you. Emily's throat went dry as she read on. She had heard the name of her family before, but this was different. The Sterlings were her family. They had hidden their past, buried the truth beneath layers of lies. But now, it was all being dragged to the surface. Ariana had tried to break the curse, the pact, but had failed. And now, Emily was the one left to deal with the consequences. The note went on to explain that the gifts, the mysterious items left behind by Ariana, were not just tokens of love or remembrance. They were pieces of a puzzle, each one connected to the curse, each one a step toward the truth. But Emily didn't know what the truth was. Not yet. To escape, the note continued, you must find the heart of the house. The source of the curse. Only then can you break it. But be warned, Emily. Once you find it, there is no turning back. Her fingers trembled as she held the note in her hands. The words were clear, she had to find the heart of the house. But what did that mean? Where was the heart? And what would happen if she found it? As Emily stood in the darkness, trying to piece together the puzzle, the air around her seemed to thrum with an energy she couldn't understand. It felt alive, like something was watching her from the corners of the room. The silence was deafening. Suddenly, she heard it, the faintest of whispers, coming from the farthest corner of the room. The sound was barely audible, but it was there. A voice, soft and familiar. "Emily, help me." She froze. The voice, it was Ariana's voice. But how? Ariana was gone, wasn't she? Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she turned toward the corner of the room. She strained her eyes, trying to make out any shape in the darkness, but all she saw were shadows, nothing more. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Emily, find the heart." The words echoed in her mind, growing louder with each repetition. The voice seemed to surround her, filling the room with a sense of urgency, a sense of dread. Emily knew what she had to do. She had to find the heart. The heart of the house, where the curse had begun. But how? Where was it? With newfound determination, Emily turned away from the desk and moved toward the door. She didn't know what awaited her beyond, but she knew she had to face it. The house wasn't going to let her leave without knowing the truth. And she couldn't leave without breaking the curse, for her own sake and for Ariana's. As she opened the door, the growl from earlier returned, louder than ever, shaking the very foundation of the mansion. The sound was no longer coming from the walls, but from deeper within the house, from somewhere below, from the very heart of the mansion. Emily didn't hesitate. She moved toward the sound, her heart pounding in her chest. The growl was growing louder, more urgent, as though it was calling her, guiding her toward the source. She descended into the depths of the mansion, the staircase creaking beneath her feet. The further she went, the colder it became. The walls were damp with moisture, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. But Emily pressed on, the voice of Ariana still echoing in her mind. Find the heart. The staircase finally ended, opening into a large, cavernous room. The walls were lined with stone, and the air was thick with the scent of earth. In the center of the room was a large, ornate door, covered in symbols she had seen before, on the pendant, on the box, on the walls. This was it. The heart of the house. The place where it all began. But as Emily reached for the door, she felt a chill run through her body. The growl was louder now, almost deafening. Something was waiting on the other side, something that she wasn't ready to face. But she had no choice. She had come too far. With a deep breath, Emily pushed the door open, stepping into the unknown. And what she found would change everything.